Let's start with one of the most heated debates, seed oils. Dr. Mike Israetel says they're fine. Huberman also had some experts on that, kind of defending it. You've made multiple videos about it, talking about oil brain. What's your position on it?
Yeah, so I think nutrition research is incredibly difficult. It's really hard to generate enough data and do a rigorous enough trial to be able to come out and say this is definitively 100% bad. You should never eat it, or it's gonna mess you up. And then it's probably even harder to do a trial and generate enough data to say, 30% of the time, you're able to get precisely this amount of seed oils and you're totally fine. And anything above this amount is too much. So you can eat this amount of chips per week. You can eat this amount of steaks pan fried in canola oil and you're fine. And people are starting to wake up to that. They're starting to realize that, there is just so much conflicting nutrition research, and you're not going to be able to do a trial where you take two groups of people, you have them eat stuff only cooked in butter for 30 years and stuff only cooked in seed oils for 30 years. Like that's just, no one's going to stick around for that. And then if the prevailing assumption is that seed oils are better for you, then you start to get into ethical concerns. Like, oh, well, we know that seed oils are good for you. They're good for your heart. Yet we still subjected these poor people to a seed oil rich diet for 30 years. To a saturated fat rich diet for 30 years. And so that's going to give them a heart attack. So it's an unethical study. So there's all these different limitations of research. So I think people start to look at more intuitive things like, okay, it takes, 40 ears of corn to get a tablespoon of oil, or it takes 900 seeds of grapes to produce a tablespoon of grapeseed oil, or 50,000 canola seeds to produce a tablespoon of canola oil. And so if you think about it, back in our Paleolithic history, it would have been impossible to get anywhere near that level of linoleic acid, to that level of polyunsaturated fat, the fats in the seed oils. We would never have been able to reach the amounts that we're getting nowadays. So I think intuitively people hear that and they're like, that's kind of messed up. It's like we've never been able to eat that much stuff, or that much polyunsaturated fat or that much linoleic acid from a natural diet. We have to have this system of processing seeds through factories to grind them with this gigantic machinery to produce a tiny amount of oil from each little seed, and that's why you need tens of thousands of canola seeds or thousands of grape seeds to produce enough canola oil or grapeseed oil to use it in cooking or use it in your processed food and so on. And so I think when people start to think about that, they say, okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And they say, does it taste better? Does it make things taste better? No. Then why are we even eating this? And so I think when it comes to fried seed oils, extra heated seed oils, I think that's pretty undeniably bad. So fried foods fried in seed oils, that's kind of like, yeah, heating these things, reheating them, the polyunsaturated fats are super fragile, so they're gonna break down. They're gonna produce these these different aldehydes and HNE. There's these different toxic byproducts that come from heating and reheating. And the more you reheat it, the more you compound the amount of these toxic byproducts. So Martin Grootveld had a good study on this. So there's some nuances. It's like, cold pressed canola oil on my salad, or like salad dressing. Some people say like, oh, it's unheated, so it's okay. Other people say like seed oils are fine unless you're frying in them. So there's a little bit of nuance. Also, there's this thing about it takes about 4 years to have the fatty acids sitting in the cell membrane of a person to change significantly. So then that compounds things of like, you have these studies where you're comparing two different people. This person ate saturated fat, this person ate seed oils, right? And then you say, okay, let's see what the effects are. But then someone could say, okay, but did you give those people a 4-year washout period? The saturated fat group, did you let them not eat saturated fats for 4 years before they started this trial? So that's where you get a bunch of confounding factors. So it's hard to come up with a perfect study that's going to account for everything and then everyone's going to be happy about. So that's kind of where I stand. Like, I understand that the research isn't is really complicated at the moment.
I got one quick question on that. You said reheating oils. So if you use it once, then you reheat it, like maybe on the same pan or something, that's worse. That makes it like double bad, like it breaks the stuff down more.
Yeah, so they're very fragile. These polyunsaturated fats, linoleic acid is the main fat in seed oils. That's the difference between saturated fats and the polyunsaturated fats. There's studies finding that these toxic byproducts produced from frying, if you use coconut oil, dramatically less of these byproducts are created than if you use linoleic acid or these seed oils. And then the more you reheat these things and the higher temperature you do it at, the more of these products you're going to produce.
I guess specifically when it comes to deep frying food, that's where it's most dangerous, right? When you have this whole bucket of seed oils and you just put your fries in it when you go to your burger joint or whatever, that's probably the most damaging then. So
and Leon, one quick comment on that is, so that's usually the context people think of is like you're heating, you fry the fries, and then the oil sits there, and then the next day they do it again over so many orders. So like reheating that same batch of oil over and over again. And then at some point I was talking with a friend and I was like, I don't know how to put it, but I just feel a little bit better on French fries in Japan. And I would imagine, my guess is that they change the oil more frequently because they're a lot more strict about these certain, hygienic practices. And so that would be my guess is like, it's the same thing. It's just it's a potato with salt and all this other, additives in it, fried in seed oils. Why do I feel slightly better in Japan? Probably because they change the oil out more.
The 4-year thing makes me think it's so difficult to create any study, I guess, and take any conclusions from a study. Because again, when I look at the health space, it seems like there's unlimited things that I can look at that prove veganism is good, and then the opposite, carnivore diets are great. And it seems like everyone has a PhD in something and studies to back up whatever position they have, even if it's completely opposite from other people. One of the things that you mentioned too in one of your videos was the correlative IQ decline. So talk about that.
I don't think it would be accurate to say that the increase, the stepwise increase in seed oil consumption correlates directly to a decline in IQ levels. However, there has been kind of this mystery lately. I can't remember if there's a specific, the something effect, but for a long time, it was the trend that IQ was consistently climbing. And then there was this one person, I can't remember his name, but this one guest on Lex Friedman's podcast who's an expert in this type of stuff. And he was explaining that this trend of increasing IQ seems to be reversing lately, or at least standing still. So the question is, why isn't the IQ continuing to increase as it had in the past? And so there's all kinds of different things we could take a guess at. One of the things that I brought up in a video talking about seed oils was the fact that, we're consuming more and more seed oils, right? And seed oils compete with DHA in the body. So a very simplistic way to put it is that the more linoleic acid you consume, the more it seems to push out DHA. And there was this one doctor, I have his book up there, Michael Crawford, I believe it was. Yeah, Michael Crawford. He had this book, Dr. Michael Crawford. I think it was called The Incredible Shrinking Brain. And he was talking about how the brain seems to be shrinking lately. And in his research, he found that in general, the ratio of DHA to linoleic acid, remember DHA is the stuff in fish that they say makes you smart. Linoleic acid is the stuff in seed oils. When the DHA to LHA ratio is high, so you're having higher amounts of DHA, that is the ratio that you see in more intelligent animals. But then, in things like the example he gives is a rhinoceros, what you're seeing is the reverse. You're seeing more linoleic acid and less DHA. So if we're eating less fish and more seed oils, then we're going to be getting less DHA and more linoleic acid. And we're going to be having that kind of basically the opposite of the ratio that we want. So one of the ideas is, are we getting to the point where people are eating so much seed oils that the amount of linoleic acid coming into the body, especially in pregnant mothers, is competing with DHA, which is thought to be incredibly vital for intelligence, brain development, and different brain functions. So could that have an effect on IQ? And I think that's something that people really need to investigate, especially when you consider the fact that infant formula has a very high amount of linoleic acid. And that's kind of like, because, so that one's tricky, and tell me if this is too much of a tangent, but basically they are formulating the infant formula based on what they've found in breast milk. So they look at the components of breast milk and they find that the linoleic acid content of breast milk is actually pretty high. And so they say, oh, okay, so we got to make the linoleic acid content of infant formula pretty high. But then you don't consider the fact that modern women have increased levels of linoleic acid in their breast milk because they're eating all these seed oils. So that is what the current woman, probably the average woman's breast milk looks like, is this high content of linoleic acid. But is that the most natural, most optimal amount of linoleic acid? Probably not. If you go back, before we started producing soybean oil, before we started producing corn oil and all this stuff, would the linoleic acid content of the breast milk be that high? Probably not. And so that's why you see, whenever you looking at infant formula, you'll see one of the third ingredients is soybean oil or canola oil or sunflower oil, which is kind of wild to think about in the context of this seed oil debate.
It seems to be one of the most difficult things to try to replicate nature and swap something out, because there's so many other factors that it impacts, right? And so, even fake meat, right? You talked about fake meat on your channel, and it probably won't save the planet, and it's not going to replace meat anytime soon. There's so many, little things that get changed that end up having a big impact. And I guess the best way to go about your health, I think, from my perspective, is, let's just try to stay as close to nature as we have been, because it's how we evolved.
Right.
Is that how you make decisions, based on the latest trends that you see, or how do you filter through all this contradicting information around really anything health related? EMFs, Bluetooth headphones gonna fry my brain, microplastics and whatnot.
Right. Yeah, so that is something that I think about a lot, is how did we eat before? And is what I'm eating now, is it so-called natural in terms of, but not natural in terms of what did we eat, say, 2,000 years ago? I would want to go back before the advent of agriculture, because that is the eating pattern. The eating pattern that we had before the advent of agriculture is what we had for basically 98% of human history. And so that is arguably what the human species evolved on, or at least was able to survive on for, these hundreds of thousands of years, right? So it's okay, if it stood the test of time this long, that we got human history, or human history has progressed this far, then it's probably pretty good. Now, people would probably say that is the nature, what is it called? The return to nature fallacy, or the nature fallacy, something like that. It's just because something is natural doesn't necessarily mean it's better, is basically how that fallacy works. So I'm at the same time, I'm looking at all this different research and how it stacks up to, with competing research. And the same thing with the seed oils, we're doing a podcast. Even if we were about to talk about seed oils for the whole podcast for a good 90 minutes, that probably still wouldn't successfully address all the different arguments for and against seed oils. So at the end of the day, when you're having these conversations, you have to kind of think about different rules of thumb. I think, what did we eat before the advent of agriculture? I think that's a pretty decent rule of thumb. One other thing is, if I eat something, does it make me feel like crap or not? And I think meditation helps a lot with this. I was talking on the Mark Bell podcast, Mark Bell's Power Project is the name of the podcast. about how meditation could probably help you with your diet because you have a more intuitive sense of you eat something and you're able to pay enough attention to your body to where you say, okay, I don't feel as good as I did an hour ago. What's the difference? I just had this meal. Okay, how does that stack up against to the other meal that I had yesterday around this same time of day? The other meal is better. Okay, what's different? So the thing with seed oils is when I eat seed oils, I just feel worse. So I don't really, in all my videos, you're not going to see me say seed oils are bad because it makes me feel bad. But me personally, that's a pretty big heuristic, is like my stomach doesn't feel as good. If I eat enough fried stuff, I'll probably get diarrhea. And there's something interesting I've noticed where like if I'm eating like normal potato chips or French fries or something, my lips start to get itchy. I don't totally know what that's about, but I've eaten, saturated fat versions of those same foods and I don't have that thing. But, I don't mention that in my videos because I don't think people would take that as very, like that's not a randomized controlled trial. We can't use that. But for me,
itchy lips. I have itchy lips when I eat.
Yeah, it's just, but just me personally, it's just like, I don't like the way this makes me feel. I'm not going to eat it. The same thing with green tea is they say it's really good for you. The more green tea people drink, the better. It has all these antioxidants. It has catechin in it, which is great. I drink it. I don't know why. I just don't feel good. I feel a little kind of nauseous almost, and my body feels a little hot. And so
itchy eyeballs.
Yeah, my eyeballs get a little itchy. Yeah, so I'm just like, well, I'm not going to drink this, even though there's actually a ton of really good research suggesting that this is really good for you. So that's, at the end of the day, you also have to consider that. Like, I think people will do stuff because they hear it's healthy and they're like, I don't feel that good on this. Like, they're eating these like kale shakes or something. Like, this kind of makes my stomach feel queasy, but it's supposed to be really good for me. So
yeah,
that's
that's tricky too, because I know some people who they take the supplement that they just read up on how it's gonna like make them feel more energetic, and then they take it and they're like, oh, I already feel it, and then you see on the back of it it's like, hey, you need to take it for at least a week to see any significant change, if any.
Must be more powerful than I thought.
yeah, exactly, right. Maybe the best health hack is just placebo maxing. Like just stick to one thing. You listen to one guru, to one health expert, to one doctor, PhD person, whatever. And you're like, you know what? I'm going to go all in with this person, and I'm just going to brainwash myself into this is the best thing. And
right.
I mean, we always feature interesting gurus on here, right? Like people who drink their own urine and stuff like that. They've been doing it for 17 years. They know it makes them feel great. And I don't know, it seems to be working for them if the placebo kicks in.
Yeah, what's really funny about the placebo effect is the more confidence you have, the better it's going to work, the stronger the placebo effect. So that's a very big factor in how effective of a placebo effect you're getting, is how much confidence you have in the thing. So if you go and you, like nowadays, this is really tricky territory because the person who is the most confident, they're going to get more clicks and views. So I'm always trying to calibrate my confidence level and try and, present as much of a story or, as much of the story and as much of the evidence as I can. But at the end of the day, it's really tricky because you'll have people, I'm seeing like all these Twitter posts like magnesium glycinate is the best nervous system healer on the planet. I'm like, one, what does that mean? Like it's going to cure a spinal cord injury? And two, are you sure it's the best on the planet? Like, did you check into that? So, at the end of the day, there's a lot of wiggle room because like some people will have genuinely experiences with certain diets or foods where they say like, this is the best XYZ on the planet. But I just bring that up because it's interesting that you say the placebo effect, because the more confidence you have in something, the better it works.
I'm also curious how they actually conduct studies. Because do they tell participants beforehand, hey, by the way, we're wanting to see if seed oils are bad or if vegetable oils are good, and then it creates a certain image in the participants' minds? Like, do you know stuff when they do studies on like how much information they have?
That's why they try and blind the studies. So they, I think what they would say the gold standard is, and they say this is a RCT. It's like a randomized double-blind controlled trial. Randomized double-blind placebo-controlled trial. Yeah, only blind people. And so,
deaf people.
Yeah, so blind basically means like you're trying to obfuscate not only the participants, like obfuscate them being able to know what exactly is taking place and what are they getting, the active ingredient or the non-active ingredient, are they getting the saturated fat or the non-saturated fat, but then they also try and blind the researchers to that, so even the researcher doesn't have their own bias put in there, because the researcher will probably have their hypothesis of, I think this one's going to be better, I think that one's going to be better, so they might interpret the data a little bit differently if they know who got the seed oils or they know who got the saturated fat. That's a tricky thing. And so, one thing, just one quick example on that that's kind of related. I was talking to Dave Feldman, a really interesting guy, doing a lot of research into how cholesterol works. And so he has a lot of information that kind of debunks this idea that LDL cholesterol definitely gives you a heart attack. That's a whole nother can of worms. Probably not the best thing to get in right now. But one thing he pointed out that I thought was really interesting was when, now that we have this idea that high cholesterol is supposed to lead to heart disease, you're going to have more instances where a doctor is going to, someone comes in with chest pain, and then a doctor looks at their labs and say, oh, well, your cholesterol's perfect. You probably have heartburn. They send them home. But then someone comes in, maybe they have heartburn. And then they look at their labs like, oh my God, your cholesterol's sky high. This must have been a heart attack. So, we got to record that in your record. And so what happens is, this is how theoretically some doctor's bias or some like conceptual bias that a doctor has could affect the data. Because then that goes into the records of high cholesterol incidence of, a minor myocardial infarction. You see what I mean? So it's like they have kind of biased the data towards the incidences of having a minor myocardial infarction with low cholesterol doesn't get recorded as much, because the doctor might say, oh, that's probably heartburn. Go and take some Tums. Because there can be these heart attacks where you don't just drop dead. Like you feel like shit, and then you can get over it. That's probably not the best way to put it, but it's not all of them mean like you have a heart attack and then you're stuck in the hospital. You can have a heart attack where, it happens and then you're pretty much able to move around the next day. Does that make sense? That, you know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's probably one of the most biggest factors that makes it so difficult to find the truth, right? Because people are always biased, and there's always a group bias or an individual bias, and even individually in myself, right? It's difficult to get rid of. Like once I've seen a certain image and I've seen a certain thing about seed oils or microplastics or whatever, it's hard to get it out of your mind. Yeah, but how do you? Yeah, how do you remove that bias, or how do you see that play out in other people? Because I think there's a bunch of health experts that you see online where you're like, yes, they're the mainstream authority. They seem to be the number one longevity person, the number one whatever person. But in the really nerdy science circle, people don't really respect them. Like, is it the biases? Is it ego? Is it malice? Like, what do you? Is it like they want to profit? Like, what do you think it usually is?
Yeah, I wouldn't. Most of the time, I don't really attribute things to malice. I would say it could be ignorance. Like they might, and that's not to say they're not very well versed in the literature. What I'm saying is they might know, like, let's say cancer. Like they might know all the literature, on like how testosterone affects prostate cancer or something, but they haven't read any of the literature on, say, like how a ketogenic diet could affect cancer outcomes or how fasting could affect cancer outcomes. So, it's. But then, to have that expectation of like, what doc? How come you haven't read every single study that exists on this topic? Like you're a bad doctor. I think that's also unfair. It's just kind of, how do you navigate it, right? That's the question. I guess for me, I'm always personally trying to run this calculation in my head or try and get the full picture as much as I possibly can. So for example, I was talking with a friend about prostate cancer, and I got interested in this topic because I'm writing a book that a good portion of the focus is about testosterone, how it affects our behaviors, how it affects our health, our physiology, and so on. So I got interested in this topic of ADT, which is androgen deprivation therapy, which is what they use in patients with prostate cancer because it's thought to fuel the cancer. So androgen deprivation therapy is actually, if you look at the drugs that they use, it's the same stuff that is used in chemical castration of certain types of criminals. So what they're trying to do is bring your testosterone down to castrate levels, which is under 50 nanograms per deciliter. So I was very curious about this. I was thinking, okay, what exactly is the benefit that this is giving? In what type of prostate cancer is the benefit best? At what stage in the prostate cancer is this benefit going to be the best? And does it outweigh the side effects? So you have all these different side effects of like fractures, increased fracture risk, increased heart disease risk, increased diabetes risk, because you're crushing testosterone down to basically zero. So all these different benefits you're getting from the testosterone are going to be gone. Increased risk of depression, increased risk of anxiety. So it's like, okay, here are the side effects. Does the life extension you get from doing this chemical castration, is that going to outweigh all these side effects? And if it does extend life, by how much is it? So this is kind of what we were talking about earlier. It's like, where's the studies that show there's no difference in eating 0 seed oils and eating precisely 1 bag of potato chips per week? So that's kind of where I'm trying to get. And I just do that with the goal in mind. If that's how I'm going to start digging into this stuff. Am I going to be able to come down and actually say like, oh, I've got the answer, guys. This is how many, the specific number of potato chips you can eat per week, and you're going to have no difference in like your quality of life and your life extension. No, you're not going to get there, but it's a good exercise to run, like to try and think about it from every different angle. Does that make sense? And try and like come up with an idea of how much needs to be eaten per week, or how much should be eaten per week, how much, kind of like a dose.
Yeah. Some data is always better than no data, right? I guess the more data you have, the more you can triangulate something,
right,
the more accurate you get.
And it's a guessing game, and you're going to have to kind of like, as you go forward, you just keep updating that as you learn more. And eventually you start to use your own experience to parse through that even better. You start to say like, hey, I don't know what's going on, but I feel better when I get, this amount of sun, and I just kind of forget about all the EMF stuff. I've noticed that if I forget about all the EMF stuff, I just don't put my time and energy into that, and I just get enough sun, then I feel better this way. Like that's sufficient for me. Because, there's just so many different things that you can't do all of them. You might be able to if you're, if that's like your career. You can do like grounding, you can avoid all the EMF, you get this amount of sunlight, you get this amount of DHA, you're not eating any seed oils, you're only eating grass-fed beef, no microplastics, you've got the reverse osmosis filter. At the end of the day, you can implement all that stuff. But I just, I'm thinking about it from the perspective of someone who has a typical job, they've got kids to feed, they've got a family to look after, and can they implement all this stuff? No, but you can keep trying. You can keep like refining over the years and implement things one at a time. So I know that's not the stuff that's going to go viral is like, here are the top 3 things. You got to do this, and this is the most important one, and it's going to change your life.
Yeah, all right, let's go right there now that you mention it. I totally forgot about that. So okay. Viral, let's go viral, guys. You mentioned you're writing a book about testosterone. Mm-hmm. What are some of the unexpected things that some people may have not heard about yet that increase your testosterone? And I mean, we've all heard of, sleep well, heavy squats, exercise, eat well. Mm-hmm. That'll do most of the work. But what are some unexpected ways that you found or discovered that help with testosterone?
Yeah, so the 3 things that I think people probably have not come across. Because I'm always trying to think of like, what is the thing that people aren't talking about? There's so many different things that people are talking about, and they do make a difference. Like you said, the squats, getting enough exercise in, getting enough sunlight. Maybe that's 4. I don't think too many people are aware of this, but there are different studies finding that sunlight exposure correlates with testosterone levels. It's not like a perfect thing, but in general,
To the balls?
So,
We're talking
no,
about
just
that?
in general. It doesn't have to be on the balls.
I know, I'm joking.
Yeah.
I'm just putting it out there in people's minds because there's a portion of the audience that will think that. I already know.
It's the balls.
$1 trillion business idea, underwear lined with red light therapy.
Yeah, there it is.
That probably would sell. You should do it.
It actually would. It actually would.
Yeah, it would probably sell. So that one, getting sufficient sun exposure, not letting your balls get too hot. So when the balls get too hot, they just simply don't function as well because the balls need to be at a certain temperature to function properly. And then the two functions of your balls are, of course, testosterone production and sperm production. And so there are different studies where they have taken men who they have categorized as hardcore infertile men. And I think the definition of that was that men who could not get their wives pregnant for a period of 6 years. And so
they actually called them hardcore infertile?
Yeah.
That's quite the label that I would never want to have put on me.
That was
Go straight into the Twitter bio.
Yeah, it's in the study. It says hardcore infertile. That one always stood out to me because it's such a great phrasing. And so they couldn't get their wives pregnant for some 6 years, something like that. And then they did a ball chilling intervention where they'd keep the balls cool with some sort of kind of like a gel pack that you just put in the freezer and then you put in your pants. And I can't remember what the specific dose was, how many minutes a day for how many weeks or how many months. But at the end of the trial, it was something like 25% of the men got their wives pregnant. So these are guys who are struggling with infertility for years. And they're trying to have a baby with their wife for years, but they couldn't do it. And then just cooling their balls solved the problem. And then they got their wives pregnant.
So I use the sauna like every day. So, and I'm not chilling my balls. So I'm like, I thought sauna was good for me.
Yeah, no, so that one's tricky because you're in the sauna for what, like an hour a day?
Like 20 minutes.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so it's 20 minutes out of the day versus the things that are probably going to be bad for your balls is consistent sitting, driving in a car. People don't think about it, but the car seat is going to get kind of hot. And then it's like, your thighs are here, and then the balls are here. And they're just, you're like...
This is gonna be the short right here. It's a Josephine like, so if the thighs are here, your balls are right here.
Let me show you a new discovery in science. They discovered where the balls are. But your
leg, ball.
You're basically insulating them. And your thighs generate heat. The car seat's generating heat. So you have this kind of like, insulating factor that is just keeping the balls hotter. And there was they even checked I think it was something like a 2 degrees Celsius increase in ball temperature while you're sitting down. And then there was another study finding a 3-degree increase in ball temperature decreased sperm production by over, I don't want to get the number wrong, but I think it was over 50%. So you have like dramatic effects on just something as innocuous sounding as sitting. And so then, people wear tight underwear, pushes the balls up against your body. That's more ball heating. So whatever you can do to cool the balls. But then also, there's this rumor online that Chinese powerlifters ice their balls before a PR to increase their testosterone and get more strength output. And so that was just a rumor, but it's just kind of one of these interesting things about, well, maybe we should try that. And then you see all these different biohackers talking about how not only keeping the balls not too hot, but actually icing them. Lucas Aoun, I believe his name was, he claims to have done an experiment where he did a ball icing protocol and checked his testosterone before and after. And afterwards, the resulting testosterone was something super high, like over 1,000 nanograms per deciliter. So it's one of these things where are we going to find a randomized controlled trial where they take guys with normal, healthy testosterone and then have them do a ball icing protocol and then check the testosterone afterward? We don't have that yet, but it's something that's really worth checking out. And I've done it myself, and you just feel like a little bit more energetic. I guess
I'm going to add one more data point. I'm going to add one more data point to that tonight.
Yeah, you should try it, man.
So it makes me wonder, where else am I heating up my balls in unexpected ways? Which is a sentence I never thought I would say on the podcast, but here I am.
Right.
I sleep on my stomach, and that you just create like you just create such a heated environment. Like, and I used to have, like, for example, the 8 sleep cools my mattress, and I always felt like it was bad to sleep on my stomach and then just like felt kind of cool down there, and I always had a feeling, it's probably not that good. But now it might actually be good.
Might be worth it. You probably don't want to wear tighty whities when you're going to sleep. That's probably not a good idea. Oh, and to answer the question about the sauna, like if you were worried about that, you could just put an ice pack down there while you're hitting the sauna, or you could do it afterwards. Ice packs, they don't really...
You're gonna be dripping from in between your legs, John, and everyone's gonna be looking at you. But just,
I'll just tell them I'm peeing so they don't think I'm weird.
Perfect.
Okay. Oh, he's just peeing. Just get a gel
If I
pack
didn't do it in the
those
sauna, like in that study, how long did guys... Like you said, the 25% of them went from hardcore infertile to just knocking people up. So like how long, like what was their protocol?
Oh yeah, I'd have to check. I think it was over 20 minutes of this ball cooling device. How cold was it? How many times a week did they do it? How many minutes per session did they do it? I don't remember that off the top of my head.
What are the other weird ways that you found to increase testosterone that people may have not heard about?
I think one that doesn't get enough attention because it's not very comfortable to talk about because it's kind of Machiavellian, is that, so it's well known that winning at something increases your testosterone. So there's a bunch of different behaviors that have been associated with testosterone increases or decreases. So if you win at something, anything from like hockey to football to chess, so it doesn't have to be a physical thing, then that increases your testosterone. And it doesn't even have to be, you don't even have to actually win. You just have to think you won. So there was a study they did out of the University of Cambridge where they got men to do this rowing competition, and they rigged the machines where the machine would just randomly declare the winner. So it didn't have anything to do with the effort or the speed. It was just like, at the end of it, it's like, you won. And then whoever got the win, whoever was told they won, they got the increase in testosterone. The other guy got a decrease in testosterone. So that's pretty important because the key function of testosterone is it basically makes you compete so you can move up the social hierarchy. And so there are studies on primates, rams, birds, and even lizards finding that testosterone basically correlates with the pecking order. So the guy who's at the top, who's the top dog, has the highest testosterone. The guy who's at the lowest has the lowest testosterone, and then the guy with the middle has like the middle testosterone. So you could basically look at the pecking order and then say that guy's going to have the highest testosterone. And they measure it, and yeah, the guy has the highest testosterone. In humans, it's a lot more tricky. There was one study finding that managers have higher testosterone, but so in like, if you're the top dog in a primate troop, then like you're literally winning at life. Like all the different things that are important, the things that are going to get you more resources, the things that are going to get you more allies, the things that are going to get you more women, pan out in that context. It's like, okay, he's the top dog overall. But humans are way more flexible. So like some people, like they go to their job, they're like, oh, my job is everything and I'm winning at my job, so I'm the greatest. Or other people be like, this is just a paycheck. I go here, like all these losers who are trying to get a promotion. I'm just here temporarily. I don't even give a shit. CrossFit is more important to me, or like, the gym is more important to me. So when I win at that, I feel better. So you have a lot more flexible perception of what is important. So one of the things is like, oh, my testosterone is not too high. How do I increase my testosterone? It's like, well, what's going on in your life lately? Like, do you feel like a loser? Like, maybe you don't have a girlfriend. You haven't been making any wins in your career. Going to the gym, like that in and of itself, just doing squats being healthier is going to increase your testosterone, but like, what are you winning at? Like, how much does that conversation come up, right? Or how do you view yourself? Do you see yourself as a winner, or do you see yourself as a loser? And then how is that affecting your testosterone? So it's like, if another unexpected way you could increase your testosterone is to move yourself up in the social hierarchy, whatever that looks like to you, because we all have different values. Like I said, the chess player can get an increase in testosterone from winning at chess. So, one dude, he's like kicking ass in the whatever comp, I don't know, hockey or something. But this guy, Magnus Carlsen feels like a badass because he's the best chess player in the world, right? So, yeah, I don't hear people talking about that too much. It's like a footnote. Like, oh yeah, wins are associated with testosterone, so it's kind of
Yeah,
but
I talked about that in the video, the winner effect, which I think resonated with a lot of people. Yeah, the winner effect is this idea that like the more you win, the more you're winning because of the rise in testosterone, and oftentimes it has a compounding effect. If you have a lot of love interest from women, you exude behaviors that make you more attractive, and there's social proof and whatnot, and and a lot of that is just like you said. Yeah, it's just, did you feel like you won? Yeah. And people who are overly negative, where they're like, oh, they do win, but it doesn't count because that's like, oh, it's like a given that I'm going to win the regional whatever championship of chess or whatever, right? Whereas some people are like, oh, I actually scored pretty well, and they're actually not that great, but they felt like they're winning. So,
right.
Yeah, that's fascinating. You also talked about how they did I think it was a video of yours 4 years ago where they had monkeys that used fruit or juice as a currency to look at pictures of attractive female monkeys or higher status. Like, break that down. I thought that was so interesting.
Yeah, the title of the study was something like Monkey Pay-Per-View, right? And so that one was really interesting, was the monkeys were willing to pay monkey currency, grape juice, to look at higher status monkeys. But
not bananas?
No, not bananas. They like, grape juice works just as well. Another
Donkey Kong
another
is not
myth
very
busted.
Yes.
Busted right now. And so they would pay their grape juice to look at these higher status monkeys, but they wouldn't even look at the lower status monkeys. In fact, the researchers had to pay the monkeys grapefruit juice to get them to look, grape juice to get them to look at the lower status monkeys. And
so it's you would have to pay me money to look at a loser on Instagram instead of Dan Bilzerian. I'll pay you to look at Dan Bilzerian's Instagram. But wait, why would the monkeys look at higher status? Why would they?
Yeah, so that's a good question. There's a couple different ways you could tackle this. So one thing that I was thinking about the other day that's interesting is the word respect. If you look at the etymology of the word respect, it means to look at. So it's like the people that are respected are the people that get looked at. They're like, kind of studied, because the guys want to be like them and the women want to be with them, right? So you look, see what they're doing, how can I be like them? That's one thing. How can I be more higher status, like these high status guys? What are they doing that I need to do? But then the other thing is, especially in a monkey context where the top dog is going to, beat the shit out of you if you are not showing appropriate deference, if you're not doing enough subordination to him. So you also have to be on the lookout for what's going on with these guys so you don't step on their toes and get your ass beat. And then if you get your ass beat, your status is going to go even lower. So it's, it's a risk to screw with those guys. So I guess, if we're trying to say why are they doing that, then we're kind of anthropomorphizing them, trying to, guess what their behaviors are and assume that they're like us, like humans. But that's probably the two things: is you admire them, so you want to look at them, and so you can be more like them. But then you also don't want to get on their bad side. So you need to pay attention so you don't screw anything up. It's like if you go to a bar and you're hitting on a really beautiful girl, and then you're like, wait a minute, is there some guy gonna come and beat the shit out of me? Is your boyfriend on here?
And where you went with that video was then the human equivalent is kind of like looking at Instagram, and Dunbar's number being 150. You assume a certain position, right, in the social hierarchy by comparing yourself to the other ones. And so if we're looking at Instagram and we're following all these people that are seemingly super successful, they get way more resources than us, we assume a lower position. And I mean, just looking at how it makes you feel, it's one of the most depressing social platforms, Instagram, right? Because everyone has their fake lives on it, and you just feel like a loser. So
exactly.
It sounds like one of the ways to raise your testosterone is stop following all these successful people on Instagram. Start following some losers, maybe.
That's why I like Twitter, because to be good at Twitter, you have to be such a fucking loser. So every time I open the app, I'm just like, this is great. I'm doing so well. I have like 3 followers on there. I'm crushing it.
Yeah. And you're just like, oh man, I feel great. I'm way higher status than these guys.
Yeah,
But
maybe you don't want to be the dumbest one in the room. Maybe you want to be the smartest one, the strongest one. Maybe every day you want to walk past a high school and just arm wrestle some 16-year-olds and win, and you're just crushing. Your testosterone goes through the roof.
Yeah, so I mean, it's really tricky. There was a couple comments on that video that was like, okay, so I gotta beat the shit out of my boss and cheat on my wife. Got it. Like this is the way it works. This is how I become high status. But I like thinking about those things, these things that are hard to measure and that people aren't really talking about. So yeah, exactly. It's like, are you teaching your brain that there are all these high status humans out there and you're not one of them? If you're teaching your brain that, is that going to affect your testosterone levels? Because just the perception of having won at something affects your testosterone levels. So is this perception, this baseline perception of I'm not that successful, is that affecting testosterone and therefore your confidence, your anxiety levels and so on? And testosterone isn't everything. There's androgen receptor sensitivity, there's DHT, there's like testosterone versus cortisol, there's testosterone versus estrogen. So to say like, I have 900 testosterone, so that's, everything in my life is perfect. It's not that simple, but it's a very good heuristic to kind of get an idea of what's going on in your body physiologically and maybe even mentally, because the mental effects of testosterone are pretty significant to where the rates of depression and anxiety are twice as high in women, and the rates of PTSD are twice as high in women. And they say one theory is that, well, maybe the difference between men and women is that women don't have this protective effect of testosterone, because the testosterone levels of a man are like 10 to 15 times higher than that of a woman. And so women are more sensitive to testosterone, so a little bit of testosterone in their system goes a longer way. So it's not as simple as saying like men have 10 times the androgen signaling. It's a little more complicated. But still, that's one of the ideas, is like, well, why do we keep consistently seeing this discrepancy in the rates of anxiety and depression? Maybe it's because they don't have this armor of testosterone.
Yeah. So the cognitive feeling like a winner is a boost in testosterone, a way that people haven't considered. You mentioned sunlight, just getting more sunlight in general, exposing your skin to the sun. And then thirdly, putting your balls in a freezer.
One more that is interesting and very, I've been playing with how to implement this more often, is fasting. So not while you're fasting. You're not going to have a testosterone bump while you're fasting, but potentially after you refeed. So I found these different studies finding that men, after some kind of malnourishment or some kind of fasting, they would eat and then their testosterone would bump higher than baseline after they refeed. Because not all the time, but sometimes there's a significant drop in testosterone while you're fasting. I did a 5-day fast once and then my testosterone didn't change. It was just like the same. On another fast, it went down significantly. So it could be a stress thing, could be something else. That's another interesting point to tackle into. But the point is these people do the fast, testosterone goes down or stays the same. After they refeed, it's suddenly higher. And I do a bunch of fasting. I've talked about that on the channel a lot. I have this fasting school group, and we're constantly talking about our different experiences. And one thing that I've noticed, and I've seen other people talking about too, is that there's this kind of, you do the 3-day fast, you get through it. It's a little difficult, as you might expect. There's different things you can do to make it way easier. But after you finish the fast and after you've refed, it's like, okay, time to hit the gym again. You're like, whoa, hey, I just, have more motivation and I'm able to put out more effort. And I've found that consistently for myself. It's like there's always this little like boost after fasting. And I did this one experiment. I talked about it in a video. I think it's just called like fasting and testosterone. What does the science say? And I did a 5-day fast. That was the one where the testosterone stayed the same. And then 6 days after refeeding, I checked my testosterone and it was double what it was. So I got a doubling of testosterone after refeeding from the fast. And I pointed to Walter Longo has done some interesting research on how stem cell proliferation happens after the refeeding of a fast. So his idea was that it might be IGF-1 because you're getting a dramatic decrease in insulin-like growth factor 1, IGF-1. You get a dramatic decrease, and then you refeed with sufficient protein, and you get another increase. So the idea is this kind of like reset switch somehow sets the stage to where the body can build back stronger. And it kind of makes sense. It's like the body just went through a deprivation period, a catabolic period. So now it's like, oh, okay, sweet. Now is the time. Food is back. Let's build back up a bunch. And testosterone is a very anabolic hormone, so it makes sense that would go up.
Is there a specific schedule that you would recommend for the fasting?
Yeah, so that's not something I can point to a specific research where, this group did 3 days, this group did 4 days, this group did 5 days. But what I would assume is at least 3 days, because that's when you subjectively start to feel like something has changed. So something is probably going on in your physiology that is significant. And the change that you feel is after you do, if you're lucky, it'll be only 3 days. You can speed it up by doing a ketogenic diet beforehand, but usually it's like 3 to 5 days. You pass through this invisible wall to where you're kind of like, I'm not even that hungry. The first day it's hard. The second day it's not as hard. The third day it's getting easier. And then some point in the 3 to 5 days, you're almost at the point where you say like, I'm not even hungry. Like, sure, eating would be fun. I'd like to eat, but I'm not suffering these hunger pangs. I'm not constantly worried about my stomach. I'm not constantly thinking about how hungry I am. And you look at Upton Sinclair's work. He popularized fasting back in the early 1900s. And he was talking about how he put this book together because he popularized this fasting method in the Cosmopolitan magazine, I think it was. And then he started getting all these different letters, and so he turned that into a book, like his experience with the aid of these different letters and other people's reports of using his particular fasting method. And one thing he said that he consistently saw was he would say hunger would disappear after 3 or 4 days. And so his fasting protocol was actually you fast, the hunger will disappear, and then you keep fasting until the hunger comes back. So the fact that he's talking about hunger coming back being a signal to refeed suggests that it disappeared at some point, right? And so you would get people, they would fast for 10 days. Some people would fast for 3 weeks. One person fasted for I think the highest one in that particular book was a month, I think. And so he was promoting it as some kind of cure for all kinds of different things. The book was called The Fasting Cure. And he said, if you want to cure your ailment, this is what you got to do. You follow his protocol, and then by the time the hunger comes back, you're going to refeed, and then your ailment's going to be gone. I'm not necessarily going to vouch for that. He's talking about different things. There has been evidence that, it does it does significantly help arthritis. It does significantly help these gut issues and so on. But, that's not really something I'm going to try and argue about right now. So to answer your question, how long do you need to fast to get this testosterone boost? Probably long enough to get that subjective feeling of my hunger has significantly diminished. And if you're lucky, maybe it'll disappear. And then if you refeed sometime after that, maybe you'll get a significant testosterone boost. So again, this isn't something that I can point to a particular trial.
I remember doing a 7-day fast. I think it was one of my first fasts. I've done a bunch of fasts throughout the years. And it was exactly what you said. The first 2 or 3 days was challenging. And then after that, my hunger was gone. And even after day 7, I was like, I could keep going.
Right.
One of the biggest concerns for me now with fasting is just losing muscle. But you talk about ways to minimize muscle loss. And also, even if you were to lose some muscle, I think it's pretty easy to gain it back. You just hit the gym again, muscle memory kicks in. But what are some ways that you make sure not to lose muscle?
Yeah, so walking as much as you can, that will make the fast dramatically easier. This is it. I can't
And
stress
also retain
enough,
muscle?
Yeah, because you're exercising the muscles very lightly. It's also going to help you get into ketosis quicker. And ketones have a protein sparing effect. And ketones reduce inflammation. And if you can reduce inflammation, you're going to be able to, preserve your muscles better in general. So the getting into ketosis as fast as possible, that's a great way to minimize any muscle loss that you're going to have. And so Tim Ferriss wrote in his book Tools of Titans a long time ago. This was an interesting anecdote where he was saying how he had done 2 different fasts. There was one fasting facility he went to and they were all weird about it and said, oh, you can't move, you're going to lose your muscle because you're going to use your muscle and it's going to burn him up. So you can't move. And so he was like confined to this room or this facility and minimized movement as much as possible. And he said he felt like shit and then he lost a bunch of muscle based on, I think it was a DEXA scan that he did. And then he did another fast where he basically just walked as much as he possibly could. And he said, based on the scans that he took, he didn't lose any muscle when it came to just walking sufficiently. So light, and if you look at bed rest, look at people who get like ulcerative colitis and they're hospitalized for a week. This will be people who are like bodybuilders, and they'll get a significant reduction in muscle mass even with like a week of bed rest. So you'd be surprised at just how much low-level movement can exercise your muscles enough to where you're going to preserve the muscle. And one of the examples I give is David Blaine. He did this stunt where he was suspended in this like acrylic box in London. And so that was the stunt. It's like, I'm going to not eat anything for 40 days and you can see me. And so I'm not eating anything. But the thing of eating that box, you can't exercise. He lost some ridiculous amount of muscle. I think he lost more muscle than fat. It was like the absolute worst way you could do a fast. And so that's, movement. And then you can get strength training in. Like people think that you're going to be so weak on a fast. And it's kind of a behavioral activation thing where like, you're not going to want to walk until you're walking. You're not going to want to work out until you're doing the workout. It's going to take a little bit of, willpower from yourself to get yourself up out of the couch. And then once you start moving around, you're like, oh, hey, actually the fasting is not as bad as I thought. It's not, I have more energy than I thought. So the 2 things I've done with that is I did a 3-day fast, and on the 3rd day, I set a deadlift PR. And so I'm not trying to claim that like it made me stronger. If there was any strength gain, it may be due to the reduced inflammation that made my muscles work better. But the point is, at least it didn't make me super weak. So like that was my confirmation, like, hey, you have a lot more strength than you think. The other thing is I did a 5-day fast, and then on the 5th day, I ran a marathon. So, if you're looking
still fasted.
Still fasted. If you're looking for a point to show like you can do way more than you think while you're fasting, I think that's a good one. And that was something I kind of proved to myself. I was like, I think people should have way more energy because you have all this fat on you. Like why would we physically be unable to exercise a significant amount while we're fasting? Also, if you think about it with like hunting, why would we get super weak? If we got super weak when we were fasting and we needed food, we'd be screwed. So I was like, all right, I'm going to do this marathon. And I did it, yeah.
My buddy Garrett, the longest fast I've ever done is 5 days, but my buddy Garrett he was an hour short of 40 days. He was trying to go for the winner effect with Jesus, and he fell short by an hour, so probably crashed his testosterone. But so he did 39 days and 20 some odd hours. And his theory was always that fasting would be muscle sparing, like as long as you moved, because if you don't use it, you lose it. But like, why would your body prefer to get rid of muscle over fat? Like fat's literally a built-in gas tank. It's your gas reserve. That's what it's for.
Yeah. I think, if you're going to do it as long as 40 days, you're going to lose like a little bit. Or some could be a little bit to a medium amount. I can't say exactly, but you are going to lose some muscle. But based on the anabolic effect of refeeding, like you've got the thing that Victor Longo talked about. You got the increase in testosterone. There's other markers of increased anabolism. I think myostatin is reduced, and myostatin is something that inhibits muscle growth. So this is actually reduced after a fast, after refeeding after a fast. And so it seems like the stage is set to where you can build muscle back better or more efficiently than you would normally. So it's like the body is like, okay, we lost a little bit while we're fasting. It's time to gain all that back.
Yeah, interesting. Talking about a high testosterone, you made a whole series about Bryan Johnson. We talked about him last time you were on the show. Any updates from that whole series? Any responses you got?
No. Well, I completed my 30-day series, so I was like, all right, it's time to move on. I haven't really been following him too much lately. He's kind of repeating the same things, and I have a very strong feeling that he knows about my videos and he's seen them. I can't prove that. Maybe he hasn't. But he did write a response on my Instagram on like day 31. He might have put it on every single day. He put this like here's my rebuttal to Joseph's points, but really it was like a rebuttal to 5% of my points. And it was a very unimpressive rebuttal. You can go on my Twitter and see how I break down how he's, even in that rebuttal, like he didn't give the full story, and every single one of my points still stand, and he didn't address most of them. He recently put out this video. My friend sent it over to me because I haven't really been paying attention to Bryan lately. But it was this video of like, why did I get so much hate from the media? And it was on his YouTube, and he was like talking about how, like, oh look, these people like are dissing me, and those people are dissing me. And he noticed that he didn't say anything about me in the video. And so my friend was like, well, you had the most concrete points about Bryan, but all he addressed are the ones where it's like, this guy's weird. What a weirdo. What kind of guy is he that he thinks he can live forever? So, I'll probably just leave it at that. I finished my 30-day series. It's there. People can find it. And I've kind of, moved on to trying to, just dig into other topics because, I said I was going to do 30 days and I did 30 days and there we go.
Gotcha. So no long form video about that?
If there's some updates, maybe. I haven't really made too much a decision on that. It's like maybe if something else comes up that's worth making a whole nother piece of content to address, I might do it, but I don't think I'm going to do something that is basically just repackaging the shorts into a long form video.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Cool. So you've been living in Japan for the last 15 years and you made some videos about it, talking about the cultural differences and why it's impossible to be overweight in Japan. Mm-hmm. So tell me about that. I thought it was so fascinating.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So that's an interesting topic because people would probably assume that it's some mystical compound in fermented soybeans or green tea, and I'll see arguments like that. It's like, this is why the Japanese are so healthy, because green tea is anti-inflammatory and blah, blah, blah. It has this compound. But at the end of the day, it's just really simple stuff. Like, people grow up with really reasonably portioned, reasonably seasoned foods that are super simple. It's like roasted fish and white rice, and then some pickled vegetables and miso soup. That's kind of like the standard Japanese meal. It's called ichiju sansai, which is one soup, 3 vegetables, I think are the characters. And like that's kind of like the standard thing. Like if you think like what is the default Japanese meal, it's usually that. Just like white rice, some kind of protein. It could be roasted fish, roasted chicken, roasted beef, and then pickles and miso soup. And one of the women I was talking to who had come back from Australia, she said she gained a bunch of weight in Australia, something like 30 pounds. And she said, I know that when I'm in Japan, if I want to maintain my weight and stay thin, I just eat that. So she just goes back to the default Japanese meal to maintain her weight. And the thing is, kids grow up with that. So the school lunches in Japan are made from scratch every single day. They're planned out by a nutritionist. And so kids are getting like basically what I just mentioned, this kind of ichiju sansai thing. They're not like perfect, but they're really decent. And so kids grow up with this. That's kind of the flavor that they get used to. So these super sweet things like super sweet foods or drinking a bunch of soda, drinking soda during your meal, you can't do that in the cafeteria. And most kids don't do that at home. Like people just don't do that. So they haven't gotten into this cycle of wanting something really sweet to drink with their meal. And so one of the guests, Kenneth, my friend Kenneth, he was saying, they grow up with a certain diet and it kind of sets your diet preference. So for the rest of your life, you don't want this like huge, like all you can eat, whatever it is, I don't know, cheese, mozzarella stick, Applebee's kind of stuff. And you're just like, I like, simple things. And when the flavors aren't too intense, then you can kind of taste the ingredients a little bit better. I've heard people, people have talked about this before, and I've noticed it for myself too. It's like when you try and balance the flavors, you get a lot more kind of subtle flavor profile that's really enjoyable. But if things are really sweet or really salty or really cheesy or really gravy-y, then like that's all you taste, right? So yeah, soda consumption is 5 times less in Japan. The portion sizes are just smaller. They're eating, their main carbs is just plain white rice. And then people will say, oh, but they eat like tempura, they eat karaage, they eat these fried things in Japan. It's like, but if you look at the actual consumption of seed oils in Japan, it's 1/2. So like all the things that we think of as bad, like fried foods, seed oils, sugar, soda, processed food, they just eat less of it. And I think they just don't crave it.
Yeah. So 2 things on that. One that really opened my mind is the convenience, right? If you go into a 7-Eleven type store in Japan, you actually get pretty decent food options and they are convenient, right? And I think just access to healthy food is one of the biggest levers. Like if I think about, okay, what can we implement in the West that we can learn from Japan is, man, when I'm at the airport, it's extremely difficult.
Yeah.
You have to get lucky to have some decent food, right? Let alone downtown, there's a bunch of convenience stores. And here in Austin, there's a lot of healthy options. But in other cities, I don't know, And then secondly, the other thing that I found fascinating was when you moved to Japan, things were not sweet enough when you had some dessert or something, right? And then you got used to it, right? And I found that too, that I wonder if you can, like how you can retrain your palate. Because here in the US, I can eat the most bland food. I can eat literally just steamed vegetables with salt. And it's really good. Whereas most people I know, they have to drizzle some barbecue sauce on it or something else, right? To make something has to taste really good. And I think I just grew up with very boring cooking. Sorry, Mom. But like I have very low requirements to enjoy food.
Yeah, you just need kind of a washout period. You just have to eat less of that stuff and you'll habituate to it. So there was a study finding that it was like they reduced simple sugar consumption by 30% for, I want to say 2 months. And then after that, they perceived things as 30% sweeter. So it's like if you just habituate to less sugar, then things, you need less sugar to get that same sensation of sweetness. So yeah, exactly like you said, I came here, I was like, oh, things aren't too sweet. And then after living here for several years, I went back to America and I was like, wow, everything's so sweet. And after living here for however many years it was, Japanese sweets were plenty sweet. Like fruit was plenty sweet. Like, whatever desserts they had were plenty sweet. I remember getting a Cheesecake Factory cheesecake here in Japan. They just happened to have that brand. And I really like typical cheesecakes here. But then when I ate the Cheesecake Factory, and I was like, this is gross. I don't even want this. And I'm like going to buy a sweet. I'm looking to buy a cheesecake. It's not like I didn't want anything sweet. But then that was just so sweet that I didn't even finish it. And you really, I think people, if they could come here and visit Japan, these things just really stand out. Like, oh my God, like the convenience store is just fantastic. It has all this really good stuff. So like the Well, I met you in Austin, and you're pretty close to the Well, right? There's a very nice.
I don't want to dox myself here, but
oh
maybe a bit of a walk.
Sorry. Feel free to cut that out.
I'm kidding. It's a 5-minute walk from my bed, where I sleep at night, and I leave my door unlocked.
There you go.
Yeah.
And so That place was great. Felt very clean, really good spot, great food. And at the same time, I was thinking like, there's like, dozens of those in Tokyo, like a couple minutes walk from each major city. Like just get it, if you just want some clean, nice food, you can go to a Japanese pub, a Japanese izakaya. You're like, I'm here to get drunk. But they have really nice, clean food that's, it's not just fried potatoes or fried chicken or, a thing of bar nuts. It's like actually really good, clean stuff. Like something that a bodybuilder would be like, oh yeah, this is good. This meets my diet.
Yeah, nice. I think one of the ways to also retrain your taste buds so that you don't have to eat a bunch of sugar to get that hit is, again, doing a fast, right? Because I think it's a very common experience that you fast and then you have some super bland food and it's just an explosion of flavor, right?
Right. 100%. Like that's always the reset I go for. If I've been on holiday, I'm visiting my brother in Europe or something, and we're eating a bunch of awesome food, also plenty of carbs and all this stuff, and I'm like, I want to get back into a more low-carb groove and lose some of this holiday weight. I'll do a fast to reset. And then by the end of the fast, I'm like, I just want a steak with salt, and that's it. I don't need, fried something or other or, gummy bears or dessert afterward.
Yeah. Another thing I'm noticing that I wanted to ask you about is your jawline barely fits into the screen. Yeah. So you told me you have bruxism, right? So you grind your teeth at night. Is that how that happened? Like how because you have a very developed jaw.
Yeah, so the masseters are very developed. So yeah, in high school I had like a pretty decent jaw. So part of it's genetics, but like you can see my masseters kind of pop out whenever I bite, and unfortunately,
you're about to break the screen here.
That's due to TMJ. I have this clenching thing at night. I don't think it's too much grinding. I think it's just the whole night. I'm just like biting down the whole night. And so I'm getting like a 7-hour, 8-hour workout every night, like 8 hours of mewing. And it's not...
How do I get that?
It's not great. I wish I didn't have it. You wake up with tension headaches and you have kind of like tightness in your jaw. And so, I mean, it's proof that you can exercise the muscles. You can... do that mastic gum and chew hard stuff, and that'll exercise the muscles a little bit. But for me, it's
what
just
have you learned about
built in. I'm just getting this. Yeah.
What have you learned about jaw, posture, all of those topics? Because I know you dove into that topic as well. What's some of the 80-20 stuff that you learned there?
It's really important. I think mewing is very helpful. If you're past the age of, I want to say 18, you'll get gains from mewing, but it's mainly from changing the soft tissues. So you're not really going to move bone as much as we may have thought initially. There's this guy named Ronald Eade. He has a channel called Jaw Hacks. It's probably the best resource when it comes to actually changing your jaw and your face. And why would you want to change your jaw and your face? Well, because if the maxilla, this upper jaw portion, is too small, that means your airway is too small. And that means like your nasal cavity is going to be too small. Some people have deviated septum, things like that. So when you don't have a good enough airway, you're going to snore. And you're probably going to be...
Some people just want to be pretty, I guess, right? They're ugly. So they're just like, anything to change my face.
Right, yeah. Like a functional face is generally a better looking face. That's just kind of how it works. And that's probably why humans like a certain type of face, because they see like, they're like, oh, that works so well. I want my kids to have that so they can like be really healthy and have a really functional face. And so you'll look at like pictures of Native Americans and they have really broad faces. They look like they could like, breathe water. And the thing is if your nasal cavity is bigger, you're not going to snore, you're not going to have sleep apnea, and you're just going to have like every single night, you're going to have a better rest if you're not snoring, if you're not getting sleep apnea. And so this has a dramatic effect on people's health. I was talking with Ron about that on my channel, about how there's all these different health influencers talking about this or that supplement, this or that diet. And some, the guy who has the perfect facial structure and he's having like, perfectly refreshing sleep because he has a fantastic airway, he might be doing better than the person who has like the optimized supplement regimen. I actually think that's really important. But in terms of like, what could you do now? Yeah, mewing, posture, keeping your posture, good posture, right? And then exercising these soft tissues will kind of like strengthen the airway and give you a little bit more space. If you're younger, then mewing can actually change the bone structure a little bit. It can change your facial structure a little bit and change the trajectory that your face projects in or your face grows into. Because what you want is you want forward growth, forward and wide growth. So that's why you push the tongue on the roof of your mouth, and that's going to kind of like, it's pushing at the walls of your jaw, your upper jaw, which is your teeth, basically. You've got your teeth here, and then if your tongue is up here, it's going to prevent the teeth from like collapsing in. You're going to have straighter teeth. You're going to have better.
The follow up to the here's your thighs.
The anatomical diagrams on this episode. This was not a listener, guys. You got to be on YouTube.
Yeah.
Oh wait, hold up.
Yeah, Joseph is showing us again where everything's positioned in the body. I think the title of this video is just going to be the human body explained and where stuff is. So your nose is kind of like, the eyes are here, and the nose is kind of like between it, but a bit lower. You got a skull. You got a skull that you're showing us there, or?
Oh yeah, here we go. I got a skull. Let's take the brain out. And so, yeah, you got this. And then if your tongue is going up here, and if you just think about it, like you have your tongue up here many, many hours of the day, it's going to encourage lateral growth and then forward growth, or at least prevent it from collapsing and preventing the upper jaw from getting narrower, and then that's how you get crooked teeth, by having a too narrow jaw.
Yeah, so you mentioned exercising the soft tissue to get better airways. What are those exercises? What does that look like?
Well, so yeah, this is the soft tissue you can exercise, right? The masseter muscles. But I meant more that if you're achieving this good posture and you've got your tongue on the roof of your mouth, then like, this area will get a little stronger, your tongue will get a little stronger. And so you'll have a little bit of change in the soft tissues after the age of 18. But to say that you're going to get a wider jaw or more forward growth after 18, that's pretty inaccurate. And it would require some kind of hardcore mewing. So what Ron's channel mostly talks about is basically surgery, but also these devices that you put in the mouth. It's called a MSE, maxillary skeletal expansion. So it goes in here, and it's hard to explain, but it expands. It's like affixed into your upper jaw, and then you expand it, and it slowly, eventually will break this suture. So you're basically cracking your skull in half at the upper
wow,
jaw.
you're really selling it. Great. Sign me up, dude.
Yeah.
Crack my skull from the inside. So it's almost like the leg extension surgery where they break your bones. And
exactly.
Do they also have a screw in there where they widen
There's a little
it?
screw. It's going to
All right, I'll let somebody else do it. I'm out.
It's going to make a gap, and then the body will naturally put bone down in there. The good thing is, you can still walk properly, and it generally makes things overall better. I think the leg thing is going to make you function just worse in general.
The bad thing with the skull thing is you have a split skull.
So you got to split your skull, you got to break your legs. New health hack, just get in a car accident.
There you go.
Yeah, ever since I got into my car accident, everything got better. I'm breathing better. I'm sleeping better. I have more dates. I'm higher up in the social hierarchy.
Oh yeah.
Wow. Yeah, but when would you need a surgery like that? That's only in severe cases, right?
Well,
or is it really just like, hey, I want to look better, crack my skull open?
Well, the thing is, I mean, it sounds super intense. It is pretty intense, but for certain people who, depending on how small their maxilla is, how small their upper jaw is, and how...
Depending on how ugly they are, I'm just translating.
Yeah, it'll make you
I'm
look
kidding.
better usually, depending on the person. But
Yeah.
how small their airway is, they could really stand to benefit from this. Like think of, having to mitigate sleep apnea or snoring the rest of your life versus never having to deal with that again. So it is a big procedure, and you really have to think about the provider, you have to think about the doctor, the orthodontist that you're going with. So it's an intense thing, but the benefits are pretty significant to be able to have optimized sleep the rest of your life.
And even beyond sleep, I guess, right?
Yeah, I mean, breathe better when you're working out. You have less. Some people, when they get sick or their nose gets a little inflamed, they can't breathe through the nose. Like very simply, they just have maybe they're on an airplane, it's a little too dry, so they can't breathe through their nose, and then you're gonna have that gone. Like that'll be resolved too. So I'm thinking about getting it. It is a big undertaking, and the specific one that I'm doing is to resolve the TMJ that I have. So that's a whole nother story of why fixing the maxilla and all this stuff would resolve the TMJ. So let's skip that for now. But I've been kind of delaying it and putting it off because there's going to be significant downtime from being able to be on the channel. I mean, I'm going to have to, have this kind of hunk of metal in my mouth, and I won't be able to enunciate properly, which is probably going to be pretty annoying for YouTube.
Should we get into talk therapy?
Sure.
And trauma?
Sure.
So it seems like another thing that you passionate about debunking is this thing that you recently shared about a book that I think a lot of people have heard about, which is The Body Keeps the Score. And you said, I have a sneaking suspicion this book is BS. Stay tuned.
Yeah.
So I've been staying tuned. What's up with that? Have you made progress on looking into this?
No, yeah, I definitely did. Substack is kind of where I publish essays on the topics, various topics that I want to put on the channel, but it's kind of like an intermediary step because Substack, I can make it really long, but on a channel, making a 40-minute video all the time is going to get, that's a very big undertaking. It's like making a freaking documentary every time, especially with the quality that I want to produce. So anyways, I made a Substack about it and titled it, The Body Keeps the Score is Bullshit. And I add a couple of my own points, but a good chunk of it comes from this Dr. Michael Scaringa, who is, he's been an expert in PTSD. He's been working in the field of PTSD for, I want to say, over 20 years. And so he published a book called The Body Does Not Keep the Score. And so his thing was basically he saw The Body Keeps the Score come out, he read it, and he was like, oh, there's no way this is going to get popular. It's so inaccurate.
And what's it about, The Body Keeps the Score? What's the premise of it?
Oh, so the premise of the book is basically, here is all the science that suggests that trauma gets captured in the body somehow. So trauma, these intense past negative experiences happen, and then they leave marks, they leave physiological changes, they leave changes in how your body secretes stress hormones, and they leave scannable, I guess is the word, scannable changes in the brain for years to come. And so my big thing, I probably would have ignored the book if his big point was I'm only talking about PTSD people. But the person who wrote it, Bessel van der Kolk, he specifically says that, trauma, we think of war veterans, people who have been victims of XYZ abuse, but it can affect pretty much anyone. And then he said his definition for trauma is something that makes you so distressed that it overwhelms you. So it could be technically anything. And then he even said, so one, he says trauma could be practically anything. Two, he says that trauma is the biggest health crisis in the nation. I could find the specific quote. Let me see one second, because it was pretty...
We're probably the least traumatized thing we've ever been, right?
Yeah,
if you think about
exactly.
If you think about 500 years ago, I mean, people living in the Dark Ages, I think they were called Dark Ages for a reason, right?
Right.
You
because people weren't sunning their balls.
Yeah. That we didn't have the biohacking, the hacks yet, but yeah, people were there was famine, there was murder. One of your cousins is currently in the torture chamber, having himself split open somewhere, and you believe that when you die, you're going to burn in hell for all eternity. It's probably very stressful. So I think they would have more trauma.
Right. Yeah. So that's one thing. I want to let me read this quote quick, because one of the things that I wanted to emphasize is that the reason I got into this was because they're setting the stage to where the definition of trauma, the bar for trauma, is so low that practically anybody could have it. So he says trauma is actually extremely common. There's a lot of debate about what a trauma is to this day, but basically trauma is something that happens to you that makes you so upset that it overwhelms you. And then he says trauma is arguably...
I have bad internet trauma. I get so unreasonably upset when my internet is not working.
Yeah,
it's overwhelming.
It's like if technology isn't working perfectly, this like amazing miracle of technology, then I get pissed. And so he says, arguably, trauma is the greatest threat to our national well-being. And so the book goes in and he lays out all these different studies about like, here's how trauma changes the amygdala. Here's how trauma changes the brain's insula. Here's how trauma changes the secretion of cortisol. And so what Michael Scaringa's book was doing was basically saying like, look, I looked into the research he's citing and it's not saying what he's saying. So he would make a claim about this study found that people experienced intense shame as reflected in these brain scans of the frontal lobe. And the activity in the frontal lobe was like near zero, which suggests that they were experiencing intense shame. It's something like that. And Michael Scaringer pointed out that like, no, if you look at the study, the activity in the frontal lobe actually increased. And the study didn't even mention shame. So like whatever this study, the data that is coming from the study is not supporting what he's saying. And so that's one. And the book is like, here's claims 1 through 42. And so one of the claims was like, trauma makes it so that people have consistently higher secretions of cortisol. And Michael Scaringer was like, okay, he didn't cite anything for that. But let's look at all the research on trauma and cortisol until this book was published. He was like, this study finds lowered cortisol. This study finds no difference in cortisol. This study finds higher cortisol. So it's kind of a wash. It's like all over the place. To say it always increases cortisol is totally inaccurate. And the other thing he was pointing out is that van der Kolk, he would point to XYZ brain change, but it's always a snapshot. It's just like, here's a person who happens to have trauma, and here's what their brains looks like. And so Michael Scaringer was saying, like, we know certain things make you more susceptible to PTSD, so it's very likely that the change that you're seeing was already present before the trauma happened. So all this study is showing is that the person who has this type of change in their, abnormality in their brain function, all that did was make them more susceptible to getting PTSD. Not that PTSD caused that brain change. Because the point that he's trying to lay out, van der Kolk, in his book, The Body Keeps the Score, he's trying to say, like, look, trauma happens, and then you see brain change. Or trauma happens, then you see hormone changes. But Scaringer is saying, like, it's very likely that it's backwards. So there's, like, just so many different points. But the key thing, the reason I say it's bullshit, it's a pretty strong word. I don't use it too often I don't think I've ever used it in my YouTube videos, is, you look at the research he's using to support what he's saying, and the research does not line up with what he's saying. So it's kind of like even when I was reading Scaringer's book and then going back to The Body Keeps the Score and double checking what Scaringer is saying, and then even double checking the papers that Scaringer was mentioning, I was like, how did this guy get so popular? Because his book has more reviews on Amazon than the first book of Game of Thrones. I
was going to say it's 79,000 reviews, 5 stars. That's an insane amount. So hundreds of thousands of people must have read this book.
Exactly.
It's wild that ideas like that spread. And here's the thing: I don't know if there's any, I haven't looked into it, but
sure.
I could totally see how people buy this idea because it's convenient. It's gives them something to blame, which is trauma. And you also talked about Gabor Mate. He's another author that talks a lot about trauma and what's his theory and what's your take on that?
Gabor Mate, I think, takes it even a step further than van der Kolk. He has said that practically everybody has trauma. He said a person without the marks of trauma is very rare in our society. So like, there's a couple different quotes I could cite, but he basically saying, everybody has trauma. And it's at the root of most of our dysfunctions. That's Gabor Mate's claim. So he's made different books saying that like trauma causes addiction, trauma causes ADHD, trauma causes even these like physiological afflictions like cancer. And I think maybe even autoimmune diseases, IBS, things like this. And there were other people in the field. There's an ADHD researcher called Russell Barkley. He made a video called Dr. Gabor Mate is worse than wrong about ADHD. And he was pointing out, similar to the affliction with, not the affliction, but similar to the issue with van der Kolk, is that basically he says, trauma causes ADHD, but what Russell Barkley is saying is like, no, ADHD causes trauma because these people are disorganized, they're impulsive, they don't have good, they have bad social interactions because they're so easily distracted. So that sets them up for like losing friendships, frustrating their parents, frustrating their peers, having a bunch of negative experiences. So Russell Barkley's point was like, no, if you look at the research, it's that the ADHD, the unpredictable, impulsive, disorganized behavior sets them up to have all these difficult experiences. So they're more susceptible to PTSD or trauma or whatever it might be. And so Mate was getting it backwards. And so Mate put out just one more example about Mate. So he said, he was abandoned as a child, not abandoned, but at 11 months of age, when he was a child, an infant, his mother put him in the care of another adult for a month. And so this left him with like lifelong abandonment issues.
Which is terrifying as a parent to think about, that you might make a little mistake or make a decision that will ruin your kid's life, forever and affect them forever.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's a good point. And I wanted to touch upon that. Is people are like, why are you so against trauma, man? Like, what's wrong with you? Do you have trauma or something? And one of the points is like,
that's repressed trauma right there. Let's face it.
You've got repressed trauma. That's why you hate trauma. And one of the points is like, we have stuff that sticks around in our memories and it frustrates us. Like, why did that happen to person? Why did that person act that way? We all have bad memories from our past, and some people have really terrible memories. So my issue with lowering the bar so much that like, my aunt had to take care, my sister had to take care of my baby for a month, and now my baby is traumatized for the rest of my life. Like exactly as you said it, Leon, it's like, that's just makes parenting so stressful. Like I want to have a family someday, and I like kids. I've got a big family myself. I like my siblings and my family. And it's kind of like, I don't like this idea of like freaking parents out that any little thing that they can do is going to give a kid trauma. Gabor Mate has even said that it doesn't have to be just bad experiences that give trauma. It can be insufficiently good ones. Like how low are you putting the bar?
So it's like everyone. Like, and then how do you draw comparisons, right? Because you have to compare someone with no trauma and someone with trauma to be like, oh, look, like this is the difference that trauma makes. But if everyone has trauma, then you can't really make any comparisons, it seems.
Exactly.
Like. Yeah. It seems like I cut you off earlier when you were talking about his backstory. 11 months. He was 11 months old. He was distant from his mom for a month, and then.
So all these stories start to pop up. Once you assume that trauma causes XYZ, all these stories pop up. So one of the stories that Gabor Mate had was, because I had this abandonment experience when I was 11 months old, the brain can't form long-term memories until around the age of 2. So he couldn't have consciously remembered this. But anyways, this is his point. He had this trauma at 11 months old. And that's why when his wife was late to pick him up at the airport, when he was 71 years old, he ignored her the whole day. So he kind of acted, he was sulking and he was like a little childish because he had this feeling of like, oh, she's abandoned me. She didn't pick me up on time. It's like, yeah, fair. I'd be pissed if, I'm waiting for someone, they didn't pick me up on time. And he's probably really tired from the flight. Would I act in the perfect way if my wife wasn't on time to pick me up? I don't know, I might be annoying. But he was saying that it's due to his trauma that he acted that way. And so my point is, he doesn't remember that. He doesn't consciously remember that. And two, people's lives and mental processes are so complicated. Why wouldn't it be something else? Like maybe, just as an example, I don't know anything details of his high school life, but like maybe in high school he had a girlfriend who was always late to their dates, and so he's like, oh, that's so disrespectful. She's pissing me off. Or, why isn't it one of any other thousands of experiences he had in his life? Why is the story that I had this abandonment experience when I was a baby, so now I'm, get frustrated at my wife? You see what I mean? Like it just doesn't make sense. And so I posted something like that, and that was one of the other reasons I decided to go back to Bessel van der Kolk's book and double check it, was because some people were, I had written about this example on my Substack, and some people were saying like, well, Joseph, what you don't realize is that the trauma got stored in his amygdala. It's like
it's not the memory; it's in his body.
Exactly.
So he doesn't have memories, but it's in his body. Yeah.
The body kept the score. Yeah.
So connecting it to the idea that, you had some pushback on talk therapy as well, and some papers that you read. There are other implications as well, right? Of, I guess, teaching hundreds of thousands of people that, hey, trauma is the reason why you are this way, and you are just this way, and it's going to be like this for the rest of your life. Good luck.
Sure. Yeah. So there's all kinds of different talk therapy. It's like someone says, go to therapy. It's like saying, do a healthy diet. You're like, what does that mean? What do I do? So with therapy, it's like, go to therapy. It's like, okay, there's so many different kinds. There's so many different providers of it. Which one are you talking about specifically? So I definitely think there are certain therapies that are very helpful and very good, and I'm not trying to knock on them. CBT is one. Therapies that focus on, say, behavioral activation, things like that. So when I'm talking about this, I'm not trying to say like nobody go to therapy ever. I'm trying to say like, hey, here's things that I don't see people talking about too often. Let's take a look at those things and what effect they're having. So these trauma-focused therapies is where I got, what I was interested in. And also, what is it? There's like inner child therapy. So these therapies that are like, let's break down your past. And if we have some insight about your past, that's how we're going to resolve your current issues. And so I think at the end of the day, that can become basically a wild goose chase for certain people, especially the people who don't have who don't have PTSD. Like PTSD, one of the big issues with PTSD is that the memories are too strong. You have these, it's not always flashbacks, but you get very vivid memories of this terrible event popping up into your consciousness and causing you all these issues, to where you're super sensitive and you avoid any situation that slightly resembles that event. Now,
and you're talking about the kind of PTSD from veterans.
Yeah,
not,
I mean,
not the kind of PTSD, because even PTSD, I feel like it's thrown around a lot now. It's like, oh, my mom was really mean, and so I have PTSD from that.
Right. So this is one of the other criticisms from Michael Scaringa, is he was saying that complex PTSD is this idea of like it wasn't like you saw your parents get murdered, or you were in a combat zone, or you were abused, or you had something to that level happen to you, but it's more like you had a consistent, recurring, difficult experience happen in your past. And so that's complex PTSD. And now Michael Scaringa, that's another concept that he really argues against, and says that the evidence for the existence of complex PTSD just really isn't there. And so one of the things I wanted to focus on is this idea of that, like, you don't, if you had an event that was giving you PTSD, you know exactly what it is. But some of these trauma-focused therapies are like, oh, you're not realizing that this particular experience was actually traumatizing for you, or like you repressed that memory, or you repressed that trauma, or there's something that we need to dig up and see what your trauma is so we can solve your current issues. Because the idea is that your trauma in the past is causing your previous issues. And so Dr. Stanton Peele, he's one of the people one of the experts who was against Gabor Mate's view on addiction, because Gabor Mate was saying that trauma causes addiction. And Stanton Peele, he had a bunch of different critiques of this and was pointing out that Gabor Mate was misrepresenting some of the research. But one of his points is, if you follow this trauma narrative, then people who can't pinpoint what exactly their trauma is, but they think they need to resolve trauma to resolve their addiction, they're going to go on some kind of wild goose chase through their past. And he said if they don't find a trauma, they will create it. Now, this gets into a really interesting discussion about repressed memories, because there's these famous cases of, I guess, psychotherapists trying to dig up memories in children. And then the children started to claim that they had these experiences of abuse. But then people who were like, there would come up with some contradiction that proved the person totally wrong, the child totally wrong. It was like the person you're talking about who did this, like he couldn't. There was never a time you've only ever seen him at like a family gathering. So there was never a time he was alone with you or so. I can't remember what it was, but there was pretty clear evidence that
he was in a different country or something during that time, or
exactly at the age when you were 2, you had never met him or something like that. There was a pretty irrefutable point that showed that what they were remembering was incorrect or made up. So
that's terrifying.
Yeah, which is...
That's one of my biggest irrational fears, is being falsely accused of something.
Yeah.
And it just makes you wonder how many
I'm going to do it as a prank.
Hilarious. I would love that. And then only once I get out of prison, after decades, you're like, prank!
It was a prank, bro.
It's going to be awesome. It's going to be a great clip.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but... Yeah, back to the memories thing. So... the people go into this wild goose chase, and only until they figured out the exact trauma they had, then they can fix the addiction. Recently we talked about it on the pod too. This book that talks about the easy way to quit smoking, and one of the points that he makes is the fact that we all believe that smoking is super addictive and very difficult to quit makes people not quit. And as cigarette companies started educating people and having to educate people about how addictive it is and how, once you start, it's very difficult to quit, people actually kept smoking more. It became more difficult to quit, because as soon as you felt discomfort, you're like, oh, well, it's because I have to go back to smoking because it's so highly addictive. And I think the same could happen then with things like trauma, right? It's like, hey, I have this addiction. It's because of this trauma. And like, well, maybe it's not because of the trauma. Maybe you just, you need something else. Maybe you need connection in your life, and you already have that. And so go focus on that, nurture that. And, again, I'm not an expert on addiction. I've never dealt with severe addictions, just like everyone else. I've, had small addictions like phone or whatever, if you can call it that, right? But there's like serious implications in that. And I know people in my life who are on a chase of that, right? They're chasing the trauma and finding it, and just like, I just need to read one more book and understand one more thing. But then they're highly educated on why they're messed up. And then when I ask them about, okay, what is working in your life and why is it actually, like, why are you actually doing well? It's like, well, they can't tell me much.
Exactly. That's a big point, is the nocebo effect, which you're talking about. Like, you have this fear of negative side effects, and then in the same way the placebo effect can give you benefits, that fear or that story, the negative story about whatever it is going to give you those negative side effects. And so how much of a nocebo effect is this Gabor Mate idea of everybody has trauma and it's the cause of most human dysfunction? I think he said, there's even a quote of him saying something like, it's at the root of all human dysfunction. Like trauma is causing all your problems. And so when I heard that, that was like a huge red flag for me. I was like, you've made the bar so low. And now everyone's, people get convinced that they have trauma, and then they have this persistent nocebo effect. I can't do XYZ because I have trauma, so I need to resolve my trauma. But then that creates another wild goose chase, because what is the definitive marker for having resolved trauma? We know what resolved diabetes looks like. What does resolved trauma look like? Is yoga the one-shot fix? Is it talk therapy? Is it meditation? Is it psychedelics? So I guess the question at some point becomes, does your method for resolving trauma, does it delete memories? Do you have a way to delete memories from the human mind? Because otherwise, I don't, and I've seen that myself in several friends, like they're kind of on this chase of like, this thing releases trauma, that detox thing releases trauma. I need to do this therapy because it releases trauma. This inner child therapy. I need this retreat. I need that retreat. I need an inner child healing retreat. And then at some points I'm wondering like, okay, if you do psychedelics and you have some sort of insight that dramatically changes your perspective on life and then things are just better, how do you know that that wouldn't have given you the same benefit even if you didn't have this idea that you have trauma? You see what I mean? So it's all really story driven. And humans, like, it's been well proven that we view the passage of time in a story fashion, which is why reframing is a kind of psychological technique that's very powerful. If you can take a story from your past and reframe it, this is one of the components of Viktor Frankl's logotherapy. He says like, well, take your past experiences and do what you can to be grateful for that experience. And so this is an interesting idea. It's very positive. It sounds good. But there's papers finding that two huge factors in well-being are the sense of agency and a sense of gratitude in life. So isn't this trauma narrative removing both of those? Like if you're thinking more and more about trauma, it's almost always going to be something that happened to you, right? Like this, I had a bad experience with this person, I had trauma. Okay, so that's going to lead to resentment, right? How could it not? If you're thinking, this bad thing happened to me, that's why I have ADHD, that's why I procrastinate, that's why I'm addicted, because of this experience that someone afflicted upon me or someone, pushed upon me. And then, were you in charge of that experience? No. So it's the opposite of gratitude and sense of agency. It's like resentment and a sense of you were a victim, which is the opposite of self-agency. It's like someone did something to you, not you did it. So when you start to break it down that way, and consistent introspection, consistent reflection on your mindset, that is, Jordan Peterson has a great quote, and some people don't like his political opinions, but at the end of the day, he is a clinical psychologist who taught at Harvard. So he kind of, he knows the literature on this. And he was saying that if you look at the data, basically constant obsession about your internal state or constant reflecting on your internal state is basically indistinguishable from unhappiness. And so one of the
one of the things that you tweeted as well, right, is this paper on a wandering mind is an unhappy mind.
Yeah, exactly. So when you're not focused on the external world and you're doing too much introspection, that is just correlated with less happiness and unhappiness. Now, self-reflection of like, you think about your behaviors, what can I fix? Think about your past, how can I make my future better? Yeah, of course, that's great. We all need to do that sometimes. Your mind has to wander sometimes. You can't be in a perfectly like flow state all the time. But at the end of the day, like when you break it down, you can see how too much talk therapy can actually have a negative effect, or theoretically could make people unhappy. Sure, you do a little bit of therapy, it gets you to do some self-reflection, and then you like identify patterns in your life, the ways you approach relationships that could be better, and then you could have a better life. That's great. That's going to set you up for a better future. But I'm thinking more about the people who don't have a clear trauma. They feel like they're not satisfied with something about their life, and then they're like constantly searching for, like, what was my trauma? It's at the root of all human dysfunction. I'm not happy with things right now. It must be my trauma. So I got to do all these, And
whatever question you ask, you're gonna get an answer, right? And if you're asking yourself, in what ways am I messed up? And you dig for it, you're gonna find plenty of evidence, right? And I think it brings me back to this idea. I think it's one of these cheesy quotes, but it's true. Whether you think you can or you can't, you're right. And the person that believes trauma is the thing that causes all the ailments, they're going to have a very different experience being picked up by someone who's late at the airport than someone who's like, no, like I can choose moment to moment how I react. And they're gonna act very differently with that belief. And I think there's probably a lot of people listening. I mean, in our audience, I think most people would agree, like, yeah, I'm not gonna let trauma like dictate that. Like, it's probably interesting to look, but I'm not gonna stay there. But even that, I would challenge people and challenge myself to look, okay, where am I doing the same thing where I'm making certain assumptions about, well, that's just how things are. Trauma is at the root of all evil. Well, one of the things that I'm thinking about a lot is, I'm turning 30 later this year, and I'm starting to hear some people say, oh yeah, in your 30s, that's when you start having some ailments and some back pain. And I'm like, get away from me. No, I reject that idea completely. And what my belief is I'm going to be healthier than ever in my 30s. And in my 40s, I'm going to be even healthier. Is that going to be true? Maybe, but I'm going to operate from that assumption, and I'm going to act accordingly.
Right. Yeah. I think how you allow yourself, like the mindset is really important. It's really cheesy, but it is very important. One person's perspective who's very interesting, and I don't see get nearly enough attention, is Alfred Adler. Have you heard of him? So Adlerian psychology is really interesting. It's not perfect, but it's got some very interesting concepts. And there's a book called The Courage to be Disliked. I don't know if that was popular in Japan, in America, but it was very popular in Japan for a while.
It's a great book. I've read it.
Yeah, and so one of the things that he says is that we are not the product of our traumas, but we use our past experience to serve our purposes. So in the book, they even give the example of, shut-ins. I feel like that's more of a thing that happens in Japan, hikikomori. It's people who don't want to leave their house. And it's like, they're just like stuck in their room. They don't go to college. Their parents just like leave food out in front of their door, and they're all, they're just like, I can't leave. It's like, I guess, agoraphobia. And so Adler was saying they might have come to find themselves in that situation, have said that they have come to find themselves in that situation due to trauma. But if you think about it, people don't do anything if it serves absolutely no purpose, right? So if you think about it, okay, yeah, you're not meeting new people. It's a very dysfunctional life if you think about it. It sounds, very dysfunctional, not positive in any way. But he's like drastically minimized the amount of effort he has to put out on a day-to-day basis. He doesn't have to contend with the frustrations that come with human relationships, dealing with like a boss or a professor or whatever. So there are some, perks to this lifestyle. He gets his food, like he's waited on. His parents, doesn't really interact with his parents, but they put his 3 meals there, and he gets to play video games all day. So yeah, it's a terrible lifestyle, and the person probably doesn't even realize. They don't think consciously like, yeah, another day in paradise. But it, on an unconscious level, this would be Adler's argument, is that the concept of trauma is serving a purpose. It is still meeting a purpose, even though it's not, perfect overall in the grand scheme of things. In the big picture, it's not the best. But you could make the argument that a purpose, to some degree, is being fulfilled by this idea that I have trauma, I can't leave the house. Like, I don't have the ability to leave the house. I bet if the house is on fire, he'd immediately be able to leave the house, like as an extreme example.
Yeah,
but that's one of Adler's big things is like, think what the dysfunctional behavior, try and think what purpose it might be serving. Because it
definitely has a benefit. Yeah, even the most messed up patterns, like self-destructive patterns, have a benefit.
Right. You can avoid a certain type of pain, whatever it might be. Like, yeah.
Yeah. And I guess to end on that, I think, we have a massive impact on how we feel, how we live, and the choices we make based on how we view the world and whether we believe in trauma affecting everything or not. And it's, just choosing wisely. Even when it comes to increasing your testosterone and choosing that, you're winning in life.
Right.
So I think that's a good point to end on.
Let me put in like one little disclaimer, because like at the end of the day, like if people have PTSD, like I'm not trying to make any sort of suggestion about how people should manage it. And I've heard stories of people have like, terribly tough childhoods. So, I'm not trying to say like no one, like trauma doesn't exist. I'm not trying to say that. It's more like, let's consider more the implications of the current narrative about trauma, I guess is the way to put it.
It's a good way to put it. Awesome. Dude, thank you for coming on. This was great, just like last time. And where can people find you? I guess YouTube and Substack are the best places to check out your stuff.
Yeah, if you type in Joseph Everett on Substack, you'll find me. YouTube, Joseph Everett should now pop up both my main channel, What I've Learned, and my sub channel, which is just Joseph Everett. So my main channel is What I've Learned - Joseph Everett, and then my sub channel is just Joseph Everett, and Substack is Joseph Everett too.
Awesome. Beautiful. Cool. Thanks for coming on.
Cool. Thanks so much, guys. This was fun.